At this webinar, we have representatives from both private and public sector with different angles of the electrification of the transport system. And before I introduce you to the speakers, I would like to inform you about Nordic Plus and who we are. Nordic Plus are a network with the national ITS organizations in the Nordics, as well as Estonia and Latvia. Nordic Plus connects innovation, passion, research, technology, and people throughout the Nordic and Baltic regions to create the world's leading sustainable mobility solutions and services. We are a network of ITS associations with a vision of connected and sustainable mobility, reachable for all user groups across regions from cities to rural areas. Collaboration, sharing knowledge, and best practices are the pillars on which we believe the sustainable transformation of mobility is built, which is what we are working towards. And here is the Nordic Plus team and a picture of us taken at the ITS European Congress in Lisbon that was held last week. Now I would like to introduce you to our chairman, Patrik Andersson, who will give a short introduction to ITS Sweden.
Ja, men du, nu är jag inkopplad. Vad bra. Tack snälla, vad bra. Toppen.
Patrik, please.
Thank you. Someone just muted me. So my name is Patrik Andersson. I'm the chairman of ITS Sweden. Just a few words about ITS Sweden. We are part of Nordic Plus, as Hanna explained. We are an industry association that has existed over 30 years. We are, as you can see in the triangle there, a non-profit triple helix organization where we have members from the business, from the public, and from academia. And at the center, you see a number of market forces that are driving or expanding the field of an intelligent transport system, ranging from anywhere between automation to sustainability. In today's webinar, we will foremost focus on the forces of sustainability and digitalization in various ways. Our industry association has started to form various focus areas or focus groups. At the base plate of our industry association, which is common to all of our members, is digitalization, and where many members focus on different parts of the transport system and the ITS systems thereof. Then we have added, since the last year, electrification as well, which is part of this webinar. And in the second half of this year, we will also add another focus area for us, which is the management of transport systems. Beyond working in Nordic Plus, as Hanna explained with the picture earlier, we all went to the ITS European Congress, which is organized by an organization called Ertico. And on Sunday, a week ago, we also held a meeting amongst the over 30 national ITS organizations in an alliance called ITS Nationals as well. So Sweden is part of a bigger context, as well as we have a domestic collaboration with many partners as well that we don't see on this picture. So with that, Hanna, I hand over back to you. Just a few words from me.
Thank you very much. And with this introduction, we will now start the webinar. And I would first like to welcome Magnus Lindgren, Expert Vehicles, Machines and Fuel at the Swedish Transport Administration, who will speak about policy measures in Sweden and future challenges. Please welcome Magnus and share your presentation.
Thank you, Hanna, and thank you very much to ITS Sweden and the Nordic Plus webinar for the opportunity to participate here and speak about a few topics on electrification in Sweden. This is something that is changing very fast, and I will just give a broad overview, and I will focus on the past, present, future in the work on electrification in Sweden. And I hope you can see my presentation.
Yes, very well.
Perfect. I see some nodding here. And what's happening behind you when you're looking forward for a transition like this, because electrification is such much more than just technology. It's a system shift. You change your fueling behavior completely from going from refueling everything on the public market to charging most of your energy on the non-public domain. So at home, at work, at the depot, etc. But it's also quite important to see these drivers in this transition. And I would like to start with a general citation here. And I will not read this in detail, but I urge you to read the text and think about, is this past or future? But they are talking about clean street, no exhaust pollution, no noise, swiftly moving through the streets. And actually, this is from an article published in 1899. This describes the society transition from horse and carriage to combustion engine driven cars. And all these attributes were extremely important for the possibility for the society to keep on developing. There was a lot of dust or particle pollutants. The particles were slightly larger than exhaust particles. The noise was incredible. There was iron, wooden wheels covered in iron running on cobblestone. The horses needed endless amount of areas for grazing and feeding, etc. And just moving to the space and energy saving car made a tremendous change. And this is exactly what we're doing today. Just change motor car for the electric vehicle. And this over 100-year-old article is still valid. So the main drivers are still there. However, now we are facing, and I will just say a few words on the passenger car market in Sweden and then focus a little bit more on the heavy duty side. Because the light duty sector has sort of taken off in Sweden already. Not as much as in Norway, but still more than every other car registered last year was an electric car, either a plug-in or a pure electric one. But this started already in 2013. Then we had more than 1% chargeable vehicles in the new registration. But it stayed rather low until 2019. And then we passed 10%. And from 2019 up to today, we've gone from 10% to 50%. This might be that famous S-curve in a transition. So hopefully we are now in a quite strong market-driven change for this electrification for the light-duty vehicles. Although the market is of course affected by different governmental measures, things that happens around the world. For example, the energy situation in Europe will affect this transition as well. The different the pace of the economy, etc. But what we see right now for the heavy duty side, we just passed 1%. Last year, we were over 2% in the new registration for heavy duty vehicles. The question is, would we have a 10-year transition here as well? Or would this more commercial, more market-driven sector be quicker in the adaptation to the electric mobility, or would it take the same as for the light duty vehicles? And for the heavy duty sector, it's quite important also to look just what happened yesterday. I hope all of you have heard about Tesla and the Tesla Semi, because in 2017 there was this heavy duty truck powered by battery, and one of the major truck manufacturers described that vehicle as, yeah, it can drive crisps, basically saying it will be so heavy, so full of battery, so the only loading capacity possible is air. 2017. At the same time, the Swedish Transport Administration published our national roadmap for electric road system, basically propelling a heavy duty truck with electricity whilst it's on the move on the road. And in that roadmap, we concluded that it is not possible to carry enough energy on board a heavy duty truck in order to propel it to do the work. So it's 5 years ago. The industry, the academia, the government all concluded it is impossible to propel a truck with batteries. Now we see that the manufacturers have a whole range of battery electric cars and also or trucks, and you can see that one of these key changes is the evolution of batteries. And this is a graph taken from Patrick Plötz and the Fraunhofer Institute in Germany. So basically saying that the battery capacity has gone from barely fulfilling the needs for urban or city logistics for heavy duty trucks to be able to cope longer ranges and heavier trucks, basically moving the technology border upwards in this graph. And frankly speaking, what we see now is full range of battery electric trucks offered commercially from more than one truck manufacturers. We see tests on the roads with 80-ton battery electric forestry or mining trucks. We see that there are batteries entering the market with a life length of 1.5 million kilometers of heavy duty operation, basically the whole life length of the truck. This is in 5 years' time. And to cope with this change, I think is very, very difficult. And I think that's very important to have these kinds of seminar to actually talk with all the stakeholders involved in this transition, because it's a complete game changer, what we've seen on these 5 years. From impossible to not be on that transition. And if you look instead in the future, we can see that this European framework Fit for 55 have a lot of different measures that actually are directly connected for the transition of the transport sector. We have the energy for building, and we have the trading system, the effort sharing regulation, we have the energy taxation, we have the renewable energy directive, we have the CO2 regulation for vehicles, and we have the regulation infrastructure for alternative fuels, often called AFIR. And that one is quite interesting in terms of the obligation it puts on member state level. There is a mandatory rollout of charging station on every major road in the 10T road network in Europe from 2025 up to 2030, 2035. And they specify there should be a charging station every 60 kilometers. It should fully built out have 1.2 megawatts of charging capacity, at least for light duty vehicles, and 7.2 megawatts for heavy duty trucks. Although for the heavy duty trucks, it is slightly lower for the comprehensive road network. It's not 60 kilometers, it's 100 kilometers, and it's 3 megawatts of minimum charging power. But it's also a requirement to build public charging infrastructure in proportion to the light duty electric fleet in the country, corresponding to 1.3 kilowatts of public charging capacity per battery electric car and 0.8 kilowatt per plug-in electric vehicle. And I have looked on the Swedish infrastructure, and we are above that threshold. And the current infrastructure in Sweden is enough for the projected vehicle fleet during 2024. But already in the end of 2024, we need to add additional infrastructure to fulfill that requirement. And I also looked on Norway, and I think you are also just above that threshold. So there is several countries that are on that level, but with a high speed in the increase of the vehicle fleet, there is also a high requirement for the rollout of new infrastructure. That also adds some hydrogen refueling station. It's part of the electrification, and that's on every 20 or 200 kilometers along the 10T core network. But one thing that also is important here, there is a lot of requirements on the charging station. For example, ad hoc payment. You can use apps and different memberships solution, but there should always be the option to pay with a traditional payment card on the faster charging station. And I'm guessing these slides will be distributed to the audience, so I have just put together a list of different policy measures already in place in Sweden, and they are around different purchase incentives. There are taxation for owning the vehicles, and there are some incentives connected to the infrastructure or the use of the electric vehicles. I have shown the Swedish name of the policy and then a word by word English translation. And I think I have done my 15 minutes here and happy to take some questions, and I will be here for the rest of the seminar as well.
Thank you so much, Magnus. Thank you.
Magnus, maybe I can kick off with a question for you, and then the rest of the forum could pitch in afterwards. So if I ask you to put yourself in beyond 2024, which you mentioned, it seems like we're fit for 55 until 2024. But what challenges beyond that do you see that the market needs to solve on their own, and where do you see that Trafikverket can add some difference as an authority to step into the market and do things beyond there? Could you elaborate on that? Would that be possible?
Yes, and I will start with the second part here, that what happens after 2025 is that all these requirements along the 10T network is falling in place. And that is not a huge amount of kilowatts of public charging infrastructure that should be built. Only 500,000 kilowatts only by 2030. But enable to get them with the appropriate size of the station at the appropriate distance, I think Sweden, or not just the Trafikverket, or all the authorities involved in this, have to think about how should we design our policy measures. And I think here we're not talking about Trafikverket, the energy agency, the environmental protection agency. We're talking about a collective work from these authorities. And that's actually what we are doing right now in a governmental assignment. We are thinking about having a single point of contact instead of several different authorities doing things in parallel, or at least it can be perceived as in parallel by the members of the public. But of course, we have been working together, and we will strengthen that cooperation between the authorities, because we have to do this collectively, the authorities and all the parts of the society. But I think we have to see a slightly adaptation of the policy measures, because this is a law. We have to fulfill it.
Thank you for your answer, Magnus. I think there's 2 hands up. I'm not sure exactly who was first, but if I look, can someone help me in? Is it Emil or Tom?
Emil was
yeah, hello, I think I was first. So hey, Magnus, thanks for the presentation. Easy question. Sweden dropped the fuel quality directive, in a way, requirements to the EU level minimum now, meaning that there is as few biocomponents in the distributed fuels as possible, and that will cause some challenges to Sweden to reach CO2 reduction targets. What effects are you looking into on the side of electrification, because you somehow need to reach the CO2 reduction targets? Are you going to buy credits from EU ETS? Are you going to support charging so that would cover the biofuel part? What thoughts you have here?
Yes, thank you. That's a very good question, but I unfortunately don't have the answer. The government is just now on the edge to publish their climate roadmap. Every new government in Sweden has to publish their, say, roadmap for handling the climate challenges, and the current government has not yet done it. But what we can see, when the Sweden removed that reduction quota, it's very difficult to fulfill the national requirement for the domestic transport, 70% reduction by 2030. I don't think it has the same impact on the European regulation. But again, this reduction or the reduction in biofuel mandate is only for the current mandate or the current term for the government, basically up to 2026. But again, I think it's very difficult to go from a 6% blend in up to 50% in a few years. So it's a big challenge for the national target. And for the European targets, I think we still have a few years to evaluate. But again, a strong electrification is very important for the long-term goals.
Thank you, Magnus. Emil, does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, this was a question with absolutely no chance to give a straight answer, so I think that was as good as one can give. Thank you very much, Magnus.
Thank you, Emil. Tom, your question.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Magnus, I would like to come back to what you said a little bit more specifically to the trucking example. This is the reason why I would like to discuss that is this is something that I've been involved with, not with the Tesla truck specifically, but I've been in other projects for truck electrification. And also around the time of 2017, what we had realized is that indeed, if we would consider electrifying trucks with the batteries that we had at the time, indeed, they won't be able to carry anything because of the lack of sufficient technology. However, what we had realized is that it is possible to electrify trucks even with the technology that we had many years
I lost Tom.
Yes, I
the
think-
trucking. Oh,
No, again,
Tom,
you,
is it
we lost you for a while.
or
Came back.
do something. Okay. So the main problem was in the perception of the driving and user patterns and the estimation when the trucks must be recharged. So my question to you is there do you see a change that's already ongoing in the adaptation of the use patterns for the electric vehicles and for any other vehicles that would therefore allow more swift electrification? Have you heard?
Yes, again, a very difficult and good question. But I think the electrification enables a completely different behavior. For example, you remove the energy supply from a purely public domain to a mixed private public domain. You can charge whilst you are not doing anything else. For example, if you can charge whenever you stop, you don't lose any time for charging. So again, I think we have to look on this on an also a behavior changes. One thing that we get from the trucking industry is, of course, this driving and rest time regulation in Europe. Because again, you are not as a driver interested in stopping before you have to stop due to the regulation, because then you lose time. But what we see here on the current use of diesel fueled trucks, they have a quite interesting stopping behavior. So they could be, if they can charge whilst they anyway stops, this could be done quite easily. The challenge is there a charging station where they stop? And for me, this is actually pointing to a quite high share of non-public charging solution for the commercial traffic. For the private light-duty vehicles, of course, we see that the non-public charging is the backbone and probably will be. It will change slightly when people's without a fixed parking place will buy the electric cars, but then we get, let's say, a public slow charge during the night need instead. But I think, I say, a behavior change is necessary, but I don't think it will be extremely fast. And I think the technology is quite flexible if it's done with some, say, thinking behind it.
Thank you, Magnus. Tom, I hope that this answer gave you some insights.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm sorry I dropped out of the call all of a sudden, so maybe the entirety of the question was not heard. Maybe we can come back to it later. I'm genuinely interested on the subject, so maybe we can discuss it later even more. But thank you very much. Absolutely, it answers it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hanna, how are we on time? Can we take more questions, or
I think
would
we can
like
take a
to move
last
on?
question from Marco, who has been written in the chat. So Marco is asking, there have been some, not too many experts in Finland who have said that we should carefully study the possibilities of battery swapping in heavy traffic. How do you see this option in electrification of truck transportation?
I think it's a very interesting technology here, and I think we have to look on this not purely as a technology aspect, by a complete business or system change, because the battery swapping makes sense in terms of quick exchange or quick refueling of batteries. You just go in on the station, 5 minutes later you have a fully charged battery, you're out on the road. But then you add challenges about who is responsible for the state of health of the battery. What is the business model? How much of the charging will be done on the public domain? Do you have a valid business model as a battery swapping operator? Could a battery swapping operator be a flexibility or service provider for the electric grid and have battery swapping as a side business? So again, we are just scraping on that technology, but we have to look on it in a system perspective and not purely on a technology perspective. But what we see here is, for example, that more than every other electric truck sold in China is a battery swap truck. So that means that the technology is developing. However, a big city in China is more than 10 million people. Sweden has 10 million people in the whole country. So again, the land use, the electric grid challenges are completely different as well. So again, have to look at on a system level.
Thank you, Magnus. I think, Hannah, we should move on then.
Yes, of course. Now we welcome our next speaker, Wenche Teigland from Found in Norway. And you will talk about the Norwegian EV journey and our challenges in the near and distant future. Welcome,
Thank you.
Wenche.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you for the invitation to participate in this webinar. I will share my screen. Okay, I hope you can see the same thing as I see. Thank you so much. I've really been looking forward to this. I represent a company. It's actually a scale-up, and the company is a result of a research project that we together with a lot of partners, among those ITS Norway, who's been very important to us, has worked on the Norwegian EV market, looked through it, got a lot of insights, and as a result of that, come up with a new solution for solving the sharing and charging of EVs. I will come back to that later. But first, let me start with giving you a very short insight in the EV landscape in Norway, for those of you who are not very familiar with this. We are around 5.5 million Norwegians. So far, we have 6,000 fast charging points in Norway, and the penetration of EV is around 21% by end year 2022. The last numbers I've heard is that we are reaching 25% EV penetration totally. But the interesting thing is that today, 9 out of 10 new sales are electric vehicles. So the market is really running fast. And what we are also seeing is that when it's been the biggest cities who's been the fastest growing market so far, we also see that even cities, smaller cities far, far north are also speeding up the new sales of EVs. Another takeaway from the Norwegian market, which is important to remember, is that by 2025, there will be a ban on combustion engines and for new sales. So which meaning that are you buying a new car, it has to either be non-emission car or electric car. And one more thing that is not mentioned here, but I'm sure you're very much aware of, is that there's been a lot of subsidies in the Norwegian EV market. These subsidies are now also kind of withdrawing, and the market is standing on their own foot in a more extent than we have seen for the past 10 years. But my focus today will be on a project called the Spot On. It was a project that started up the winter of 2021. It was supported by the Norwegian Research Council, and we were a lot of parties in the consortium where we had tech companies, we had ITS Norway, as I mentioned before, we had legal advice, we had the biggest car member organization in Norway, NAF, and also some city municipalities joining the project. And the project's goal was to look at the Norwegian EV market and see if we could come up with better solution, which was more customer-centric. And if you remember, well, you don't, in Norway, the summer of 2020, in the mid-COVID-19 situation, a lot of Norwegians went on holiday in Norway instead of going abroad. And the result of that was that we really, it got really visual or transparent that the EV charging solutions the customer was not happy with. And that was the basis for this project. We wanted to look into what can we do to improve the charging situations for the users. And the hypothesis we had is that we could build a user-centric platform which increased the transparency, made sure that we still had innovation and competition in the sector, and also profitable business models for the ecosystem. The first part of the project, let me just go back. The project was divided into 4 parts. If you look at the upper right part of the slide. First, we spent a lot of time finding out what the user thought of the solutions. The second part was talking to a lot of actors in the ecosystem. I think we spoke to almost 40 different companies, both the old mature companies who was entering the business, but also a lot of newcomers. The third phase of the project was the productification. And then we had a final phase where we looked into regulation and standardization. What we learned from the users was quite important for what we did moving on. The users was not happy with the solution. They wanted more predictability. When can they charge? What is the price? Is there a line? Can I book it advance? And so on. There was a lack of common standards, which made charging quite difficult for many to understand. They didn't understand how to connect to the chargers. There was a lot of different payment solutions. The pricing structure was very confusing and not able to understand for the users. The first generation of chargers was also annoying because there was a lot of them out of order. I think that has improved a lot for the past 2 years. And they also requested information and for the charging status. Is there any queues? Is there any waiting time, or can I book a charger in advance? And also for those who has not access to private chargers, they think it's challenging to buy an EV because they don't know how and when they can charge. Just one application, that's something all of them talked about. And I will come back to that. Also, all the different payment solutions they had to face. And also all the Tesla drivers, they were the most happy. They were quite satisfied with the Tesla network. And for all those who didn't have a Tesla, they were looking into that area and was dreaming about that solution. What also have changed during the past years is that now we see a very firm development that the EV users want to charge when they stop to do anything else. They don't want to stop for charging. Which is also changing the pattern. I think, Magnus, you mentioned that the backbone of the system will be not the public fast charging, but all the chargers that we have available, all the infrastructure we have available on destinations and so on. For the market insight, after talking to all these different players, we found the market very complex, not transparent. It was growing quite rapidly, and there was a combination of old big companies, utilities, also car manufacturers entering into the market, and at the same time, a lot of new players and new startups who came with quite new solutions. The ecosystem, as you are well aware of, that makes this segment so unique. It's fully digitized from the start, which make it quite unique for new software solutions. We also see that the EU, they will regulate the market. And since we started in the winter of 21, they have actually done quite a lot of interference in the market. And one of our takeaways is that standardization and more rules are in the market would have been a benefit much earlier. Another interesting takeaway is that the public sector, besides that they own a lot of charging infrastructure, all the cities in Norway are among the biggest owners of infrastructure. They do require open APIs now for charging. They don't want the closed systems. And I will come back to that later on. Another interesting find is there is a growing car sharing market emerging, and that also influences how the charging and parking solution will develop in the cities. Not surprisingly, we see that Norway has been ahead of the electric car adoption and payment solution, but I also think, and one of our learnings is that we also made a lot of mistakes that maybe the other markets can benefit from, and not performing the same mistakes that we have been doing. This is a very full slide, and I don't expect you to study the figure on the right-hand side of the slide. But we had a research partner with us, which is TUI in Oslo, and they did a mapping of all the players in the system. And it's so complicated, and the cooperation between the players are very, as I spoke of before, very little transparent, and makes the understanding of the whole ecosystem very, very complicated. And the first learning from the Norwegian EV journey is that all the CPOs, all the infrastructure owners, they've been their strategy was land grabbing, getting the best location, putting up the chargers, not being too concerned about the users and making it user friendly enough. And the user wants access to all chargers, and today that is quite mission impossible. If you want access to all the charging station, public charging stations in Norway, you need more than 20 different user applications to navigate the landscape. And the 13 different payment solution is also very confusing and frustrating for the user. One other insight into the market is there's a lot of closed systems. I will come back to that, with quite a few limited roaming options. Those who own the chargers want to also own the customer, and they don't want other parties to get access to the chargers they have. That might be a little bit unique for the Norwegian market, because we see in the European market that this is developing a little bit different. Also, when it comes to the car navigation system, where the bigger few CPOs has been entering into agreements with the OEMs, and also giving not access to the full system through your car. In Europe, there have developed some large and expensive roaming platforms, which still have not been fully implemented in the Norwegian market. Again, the main focus for the Norwegian infrastructure owners is to lock in the customer with different lock-in schemes through the application, using their application. The last things I just want to briefly mention here is that the different hardware suppliers have also different standards and different solutions when it comes to power levels and user interfaces, which means that one charger is not the same. All the different brands of chargers are giving the users different experiences. That is also something that we see changing now, where the charging manufacturers are kind of standardizing the solution into a bigger extent. In the project, we looked at 4 main scenarios moving ahead, where we, on the y-axis, looked at a consolidation or a limited consolidation, and on the left-hand side, where the charging operators got in charge, or where the car manufacturers or the EU regulation took a bigger saying in how to develop the market. The scenario 1 is that the large vertical integrated CPOs and EMSPs took control of the market, and that kind of gives the parallel to the gas stations we have had in the past, but with kind of new energy station models. Scenario 2 is that the car manufacturers takes control and integrates it's kind of the Tesla model, where they integrate the navigation system and the EMSP services into the car. Plug and charge becomes dominant, and new startups, new players will handle car ID and payment information. But the EU might decide that they want to open up all these APIs, and that could give room for the tech giants to take more control. We haven't seen that actually evolving so far, but there was a scenario we looked into in the project. Scenario 3 we looked into was that EU regulations with requirements for payment for bank cards and so on would dominate the solutions ahead, and that's actually been happening. EU regulation has been taking a more active approach to this, and that could in the longer run limit the EMSP services. The last scenario was that the charging operator system was in control, and that interaction between software and data platforms into a bigger extent integrates the charging infrastructure and the EMSPs. Hopefully leading to a seamless access to the entire charging system in one place and with a simplified payment solution. And it is the scenario 4 that we took with us to this productification and solution of the project. Because what we concluded with was that the insufficient charging network is a problem in the Norwegian market. And to be able to, as Magnus good pointed out, to be able to reduce the CO2 emission in the transportation sector, we think that lack of access to charging infrastructure will be the main obstacle to the transition to EVs. And having all those closed networks that I've been presenting now, it causes a labyrinth of complexity and leaving the user confused and frustrated, and a kind of reluctancy to buying the EV or moving into the EV market. So utilizing existing charging infrastructure, that is quite important. And here is a very key point of my presentation, is that 90% of all chargers available are private or semi-private. And if we can unlock this capacity, it will be quite important for the EV journey from Norway to get from today's 25% to a fully electric car share. So this was a very guiding star for us when we start moving on to the solution part. We also talked to Oslo and the biggest cities in Norway, and they are quite aware now that existing infrastructure and land must be better utilized. Another key driver is that the sharing economy is kind of a strong force, especially for the younger generations, not only sharing the car, but also sharing your house and sharing the charging infrastructure. And smart cities have smart users, and they are quite used to working in the digitized world, which means that the solution we bring on for the charging industry has to be very digitized. This is taken from EU Fit for 55. They are saying in their report that they need more than 33 million new charging points by 2030. That is an extremely high number of charging points. And if you then remember that 90% of these charging points will be what we call normal chargers, not fast charging, it leaves an enormous potential for unlocking the availability of normal chargers. So what we did in the second half of the project was to build a platform, which is an open network of shared chargers, where charge point owners, that being commercial buildings, workplaces, municipalities and counties, hotels, destinations, sport facilities, private chargers, and a segment which we think will be very important when moving into the service cars for the artisan business. Service cars where you can charge at home and get a solution which gives the owner of the charger the payment they need. Today, many of the handcrafts company in Norway are actually charging on fast chargers in the morning, both expensive and also not efficient work time when they have to stand there for 30-40 minutes to charge every morning. On the other side of the platform, we will open up the APIs to all user interfaces, meaning if you want to use your utility application, your car application, your parking application, or if you have a fleet, if you rent your car through a fleet owner, you can use their application. You will find a charger. You can connect to the charger from any application you prefer, and you can start charging and pay. So that is the main idea of this solution. And we think when scaling up now that this is a solution the user interface will very much appreciate. And if they appreciate this, more electric CPOs, more CPO owners will choose to share their charges on the platform, thereby unlocking the availability of the infrastructure. We've been in the market for 5 months now, since the beginning of the year, and it's growing quite fast. And what we have made is a very easy administration side, where the charge owners very easy can onboard the charges to the platform. They decide what it's going to cost, they decide when to share, and they also can make their own groups if they have employees who are going to have another price than the rest of the public. And for the charge side of the platform, they get very easy access through the application they want to use. They can also use, of course, a QR code on the charging point if they think that is the most convenient way to move forward. And finally, just to try to give some more insight into these 3 solutions that we see now emerging in the ecosystem. You have the closed network, which I've been talking a lot about in this presentation, where the CPO owns the chargers. He owns the platform where the chargers are available and have a user application for the customer. So he owns the chargers, he owns the user, and he sells the energy across the platform. Then we have the EMSPs, which is kind of a semi-open charging network, where they either by roaming technology, roam the platforms, the infrastructure from other CPOs, or they connect the CPOs directly to the platform. And then by using their own application, they can offer charging services to their customers. They do not own the infrastructure, but they own the platform, they sell the energy and own the customers. And then you have the Found solution, which is a completely open network integrator, where we also collect all the access to the chargers on the left-hand side of the platform, but we open them up through any user interface on the right side of the platform. And with this solution, it's a totally software solution where the platform doesn't own the chargers. It doesn't sell the energy. We are connecting a buyer with a seller, and we don't even own the user. So that was my insight from the Norwegian market based on the Spot On project. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wenche. That was really, really interesting to hear.
Yes, thank you. This is Patrick. I think I have a problem with my camera. I apologize for that. I actually wrote my question, Wenche, before hearing your presentation, but practically, how do you handle interoperability challenges between software and hardware in your platform? I think your last picture, there was OCPP and APIs. Is that how you manage sort of the complexity and simplify for everyone by using standards, or how do you do it?
No, that is quite correct. The OCPI and OCPP is standardized by the EU now. So all normal charging stations or all normal chargers have this, at least for the new chargers, the new generation of chargers, they have this technology built in. So, but we have the first generation of chargers didn't have this. But this is changing a lot now, and we don't see any hardware producer who doesn't open up through an OCPP solution.
Yep, thank you for that. And before handing in someone else in the forum, your scenario 4 was what you moved on with in your project and which formed your company. Do you see any of the other scenarios have evolved since you sort of left the project that could also take place in parallel to scenario 4, or how do you see that?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we think the EU has been much stronger in moving into the market now, setting standards, setting regulations, and I think that we think that is very good. It's important for the end users. So that is a takeaway from the early days in the Norwegian market, that maybe Norwegian authorities should have been firmer in what kind of charging standards should be used, what kind of payment solutions should be available, and so on. And so definitely, we think both EU is taking more grip of the business. What we are not sure about it, what's the OEMs and eventually the tech company is going to do. If the tech company is going to move in here, we are not sure about that yet.
Thank you for that, Wenche. Any other questions from the forum? Magnus and Tom after that.
Yeah. Thank you, Wenche, for a very interesting presentation. And I was relating to the upcoming AFIR regulation. And I think it's a great idea to try to find solution to open the non-public charging infrastructure to the public, because that increased the utilization rate and the profitability of the charging. It's easier for the public, more accessibility, etc. However, in AFIR, there comes a lot of requirements as well. The charging station should have a payment method. They should be digitally connected. They should be prepared for smart charging. You have to make both static and dynamic data available. Do you see that this is a major challenge for a modern non-public charging station to take that step to being public on certain time or hours of the day?
Well, you need a payment solution. That is for sure, and that is a part of the solution we are also offering. When it comes to energy management, we think we can work together. That is not a focus area of our solution right now, but we think that our way moving forward will be to cooperate with those players who are actually getting into that part of the software system. I forgot to tell you, but I have my background from the utility business and also been working a lot with grid in my past, and we think that utilizing normal charger is also very important, not to overinvest in the grid when it comes to the fast charging infrastructure. So we are spending a lot of investment in the Norwegian grid today to make ready for fast charging. If we can move some of that use over to normal charging, that would be good for the whole society and also for the grid itself. We are doing a lot of things with the grid these days, and we should spare it where we can.
Because I think, Tom, your question is to be a fast one, so we can go ahead with the next
very
presenter.
Quickly, absolutely. Thank you so much for the presentation. Thought-provoking indeed. I was wondering, because it seems that the focus of charging is often placed on obviously the charging infrastructure and the challenges associated with that. However, I often see that there is this lack of connection between the let's say the EV charging scenarios and the parking challenges, and that seems to be overlooked. And I was wondering if you see any trends for combination of these two areas. Are there any key considerations or potential challenges that you see, or have you experienced that so far? That the parking challenges that we have in the cities are somehow intertwined with the EV charging solutions.
Yeah, that is totally correct. But remember that the parking part of the total market is not the biggest one for the solution. But what we are doing now is that we are working together with the city municipalities, where we are combining parking and charging solutions, and also car sharing solution, parking, car sharing, and charging, which is very unique and very, very interesting. We are also working together with our other parking companies, where we are making our chargers available through their parking interface. So the car drivers can combine charging and parking in the same user application. So that is also a very interesting space to move forward in.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Wenche. So now I would like to introduce you to our next third speaker, and it's Emil Rauma from Virta in Finland. And Emil, you will talk about the servitization of electrification, and I'm really curious to know more about what that means. So welcome, Emil.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Lovely to be here. Sorry for everybody, my voice is even more terrible than normally. I have sinusitis, so that might explain some of my Mickey Mouse voice. I will share my screen. You should be able to see PowerPoint presentation. Is it going accordingly?
Very good.
Good. Okay, so let's rock. So hello everybody. My name is Emil Rauma. I'm the head of government relations and partnerships at Virta. We consider ourselves an European company, not a Finnish exactly. I will tell you a little bit more why we think of this way. I have about 10 years background on transport sector, electrification, and I've worked also at ITS Finland, so I know many people here. It's really glad to be here, and so far the presentations have been excellent, so the bar is raised quite high. I'll try to reach up to it. Good. So hey, couple of words about servitization of electrification, what it is, what are the benefits of it, how it will evolve. Let's move forward. I think I had something like plus 10 minutes time. I'll try to keep up with that pace. First, okay. So first of all, let's all acknowledge that electric vehicles are the key technology to decarbonize road transport, which in globally accounts for 16% of global emissions. And it's not a silver bullet, of course, but if you look at pragmatic way, it's one of the key and one of the easiest solutions to tackle. Electrify everything that you can, and then think others. Of course, other solutions also need to be thought at the same time, but I would go for electrifying. Yet it is, and you can see here we have an image from the city of Tampere. They have developed lovely scenarios on how their greenhouse gas emissions are rising, and what you can see from there quite easily is that basically all the other sources of emissions are going down rapidly, except the transport sector. So transport is and has been, especially in Europe, one of the biggest challenges to decarbonize. Energy production, agriculture, industry, heating, they've all gone down actually in their CO2 emissions. Transport has not been such an effective in reducing their emissions. And if you look at what I just said in the beginning, is that electric vehicles are the key to reducing carbon emissions from transport. Well, then I would say it's the electrification of transport that will help us to reach our CO2 emission reduction targets. Okay, so is it easy to switch to electric mobility? Maybe not so easy in the past. It will get and is getting easier all the time, as we heard from Magnus. For example, in Sweden, more than 50% of new vehicles are EVs. In Finland, it's more than 35-40% already. But interesting fact is that the biggest challenge is about electrification, people switching from combustion engine cars to electric vehicles. It's not their price, it's not the range, it's not the battery lifetime. What is the biggest challenge for them is access to chargers. So you need to have reliable chargers. That is the key. And we at Virta, we help companies to support, to offer flexible and reliable charging services so that people would have access to chargers. So our role is to be the digital platform that combines EV drivers, charging infra, and renewable energy in order for the societies to be able to move from combustion engine, from oil world to electrical and servitized world, which should be and will be much more sustainable. So that is where we at Virta stand. And now if we look at why I said that Virta is an European company, yes, we definitely are. We have been established in Finland in 2013, so we are 10 years old now, and we have developed quite nicely. We got in our own network, we got more than 90,000 chargers connected, and through roaming about 350,000 charging points. There's actually a charging event happening within our own infrastructure. So within of those 90,000 electric vehicle charging points, less than every 2 seconds. Current figure is something like 1.6, 1.7 seconds. We are operational, our charging points are operational, our networks in 34 countries. And then we have something like almost 2,000 megawatt hours of capacity connected to our charging infrastructure, meaning that if they would all charge at the same time, the capacity would exceed, for example, Olkiluoto 3 nuclear power plant, which is, I think, the largest one in Europe. So these are quite big figures. We are one of the leading European charging platforms, depending on how you rank, second, third, fourth, first, depending a little bit. We got about 220 employees and 7 offices, of course, in Sweden also. And we have been expanding to Asia also quite nicely, and electrification is going there quite rapidly. Good thing for European and Scandinavian companies. We offer integrated end-to-end charging solution to run your charging services. So basically you get everything you need to establish charging business from us. You get integrated hardware, charging station setup, charging station maintenance, IT infrastructure, payments, invoicing, EV driver services, roaming integrations, compliance and legislation, everything. And let's say that we are one of the few, if not the only company in Europe on offering this kind of end-to-end solution. So basically I would say that all the others, they offer some part of the value chain, but not all of it. And for example, we are not dependent on one hardware provider. We are not on two. We are operating on multiple hardware providers, but of course we need to make sure that their quality is enough, and that was the actually topic that was also discussed in the previous presentations. We provide open charging networks, meaning that we have lots of APIs that enable further scaling and differentiation of charging services depending on the requirements of local CPOs, energy companies, etc. We support roaming and want to make as open as wide charging network as possible. So we are against closed networks. Okay, and that is my background and where Virta is looking at things. And then let's turn to the servitization of electrification, which is of course it's the point of view I take. So basically what I would say that servitization of electrification is that of course primarily it's all about vehicles. You need vehicles and vehicles that are electrified. And it's not a secret, but believe me, all vehicles that can be electrified will be electrified, battery electric vehicles. Everything else is of second and third grade importance. Second point that digitalization should always be linked is it's about digital platforms. Those make supply and demand meet, increase actually quite nicely or reduce emissions because they usually include producer ownership models that have a built-in sustainability aspect. Digital platforms can enable that one resource is being used by many parties and meaning that it's much more cost effective and environmentally effective. Also, it's about moving from one-way value chain of the old, let's say, oil internal combustion engine world to a much more sustainable ecosystem that is based on electricity. And an ecosystem links and refers here is that we have more and more interlinked services, more and more parties working together, and this creates quite a complex world actually, which we will review next. So why servitization of electrification is good thing? Why do we need it? Cannot everybody just buy their own charging points, their own electric vehicles, and go as they have in the previous decade? So you own everything. Short answer is that why servitization of electrification is needed. We have a complicated world, and it's getting complicated more complicated all the time. Long answer on the why question is that nowadays everything gets old when they are young. But services keep you young. That meaning that if you buy a product yourself, you do not in a way you have the control over it yourself. It's not connected to digital platforms, anything, it's not upgraded. It gets old very, very fast. Basically everything that nowadays you own is connected to digital platforms that upgrade the product all the time and keep it young. And that requires servitization. Second point is that we have a huge amount of regulatory burden and it's increasing all the time, which brings compliance risks, meaning that somebody actually has to take care of those compliance risks and make sure that the product, which is based on a service, is compliant with all the regulation. AFIR has been mentioned here many times. It's a great example on basically it improves the user experience. It is doing many good things, but at the same time, we should be able to see it behind the AFIR that it actually brings huge amount of new requirements to charging point operators, EMPs, and other stakeholders, and somebody needs to be there to take on those challenges and offer the compliant services. Third point is that we have lots of new markets coming that make sustainable services commercially viable, but these need masses. And for example, in this case, I am speaking about decentralized assets, aka electric vehicles. Electric vehicles basically are batteries on wheels. Now think if you could bundle up tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of electric vehicles, you could form quite nice virtual power plants, and with those you could actually, for example, replace peaker plants, provide flexibility services, balancing services, various grid services, etc., and basically get rid of unnecessary investments, gas plants, etc., that have been used primarily to provide this kind of flexibility services. So for this, you need aggregation because somebody needs to be able to pool up those resources, bring them together, provide value for the stakeholders. This requires services. You cannot do it with private proper ownership, so to speak. And finally is that we have smart services that are connecting EVs and energy system, which are basically transport energy to largest markets of the world. And this actually quite nicely brings additional value to everybody in the value chain. And once again, this needs service providers that can integrate the electric vehicles energy system, make it all work. And for the final part is a couple of points why from Virta, let's say, point of view, we see that what are the benefits of servitization. And this is maybe taking a little bit perspective what we see that instead of doing everything yourself, buying everything yourself, services make it much more easier and faster and help you offer these charging services that are the key to let's say move from old combustion engine world to the electrical world, which is the only sustainable way. So key benefits here in servitization is that you get fastest time to market with all-in-one service. So instead of buying your own chargers, doing everything yourself, you actually get everything from one service provider. And of course, I am referring here as to Virta. Second point is that you get guaranteed user experience, because you can think that, for example, for Virta, services we provide, it's the bread and butter for us, and we need to provide satisfactory services for EV drivers, and our CPOs, they need to have safe and sound services from us that the EV drivers are happy in the end. And in this highlight sentence, I would say that we have been doing quite nicely. Just end of last year, there was this non-profit association did study on how well electric drivers, how, let's say, satisfied they are with charging services in Finland, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and the figures were actually top on all of the, let's say, industries they had studied. So yes, there is of course challenges in Scandinavia on charging. People are not happy at all the time. We need to enhance the service level, but still on the industry, if we compare it to banking or any other, the charging industry is actually doing the best. So something has been done right. Third valuable point is that if you buy an existing and use existing services, you get an existing client base, which provides you with a nice cash flow quite rapidly. And as said, in Virta network, we already have more than 90,000 charging points connected. And if you, let's say, turn to that charging network, put your own chargers to that, you immediately contact with those 90,000 others and all the people who use it. And of course, the roaming brings additional hundreds of thousands of charging points and their users, which gets your business up and running quite fast. From that, we get to the fourth point is the CAPEX and OPEX benefits. So we have done quite a lot of studies and work with our clients, and based on our approximations, if you buy it charging business as a service, you can actually save up to 50% of CAPEX and OPEX versus if you do it from all yourself, buy the hardware, install, do everything yourself. It's quite a journey. Second last point, which is especially nowadays Europe really big issue, is the security. So you need to have quite a compliant and strict data and security requirements, and those are of course part of this, and let's say key value proposition of servitization. We need to provide those, and those are being handled. Final point is the integrated and hassle-free regulatory compliance, which was earlier referred to, for example, AFIR and many other regulations that keep popping up, and they do require quite a lot of resources so that the charging services are compliant with those. And I can tell I've been quite much worked with AFIR for the past months, and it's an interesting regulation, so to speak, if we look from electric mobility service provider or from CPO side or from any other actually. But yeah, this was my presentation. Sorry for taking 1 or 2 minutes longer than anticipated, but anyway, thanks to be here and give this kind of a presentation. I think we have maybe time for short questions and hopefully even shorter answers.
Thank you, Emil. I have one question, and it may be that I've misunderstood it, or it could be that you actually have a longer answer. part of your servitization, is that also to provide some energy optimization or optimizing the energy consumption between renewable energy sources, etc.? Could you give an example or a case study where you have done this and how that practically works?
So everybody knows the word winter energy crisis we were supposed to have in Scandinavia, in Finland last winter. And for example, the local Finnish transmission system operator Fingrid called to us that, hey, Virta, you have more than 50% of the Finnish public charging points in your network. Can you do something with them if there is a blackout or energy crisis? And yes, we can. So all of our chargers are smart. We can connect them, and we have connected them to our platform, so we can lower the charging rates 90%, 95%, meaning that we told to Fingrid that if there is a need, we can immediately cut all the charging level by power by 90%, for example, and that way provide flexibility and preserve the energy system. So that is a reality, and we are at the moment also participating to various flexibility markets, reserve markets in Finland. So those are not PowerPoint things, those are something that is happening. And as said about combining, for example, the tens of thousands of electric vehicles to form virtual power plants, that is something that is happening really fast. So yes, it's about producing actual services. I think, Patrick, you're muted.
Yeah, thank you, Emil. It was a good answer. Are there any other questions from the forum?
Yes, there is a question. Yeah. In the chat. So this is a huge business and such also a huge opportunity. How do you see our Nordic know-how comparing the rest of the world? Who is showing the way at a moment?
Nordics are actually, they are showing the world, and as we heard from Norway, they have been, let's say, front runners, pioneers in this sentence. But of course, they have also made the first mistakes, and others have been able to learn from them and avoid those things. I could say a couple of other many things about how, for example, we at Virta have learned what Norway has done and how we have implemented those lessons to our own services. But yes, Nordics in general, they are, I would say, one of the leaders, but development is so fast, so rapid that things can change very fast. And like quick example from here is that 6 months ago, the world's leading virtual power plant pioneer in mobility side was everybody was thinking that it was a company called Nuve from United States. And actually within the past 6 months, their stock value has plummeted something like 95%. They are in really big troubles because of something that happened in 3 or 4 months to them, which is like just a clue that in our industry, things happen extremely fast. So I would be a little bit hesitant to say that even though we are doing very, very good in Nordics, there are lessons to be learned. I wouldn't say that we will keep this situation forever. Things change really fast, and it's, of course, that makes it an interesting business.
Thank you so much, Emil. Very nice seeing you again as well. So, and as you can see now, we ran out of time, but still, we will still invite our last speaker, and you will have your time slot. And I hope that all of you are still in this webinar will stay and listen to Kurt, who is our last speaker from Estonia. STNGIA, I don't know, you will pronounce it more correctly than I, and you will talk about the Estonian EV market from zero to hero. So welcome, Kurt, and you can please also share your presentation.
Yes, thank you. Thank you first of all for the invitation. I'm sharing my screen right now. Let me know if yes, you are seeing it as well.
We can see it. You can just put on the presentation mode.
Yeah, 1 second.
Now it's disappeared.
Okay, I think now
Now we
it's
see.
okay.
Perfect. Very
Okay,
good. Thank
excellent. Yeah, thank you for the invitation. It was really interesting hearing about Nordic experience. So the situation in Estonia, it's a little bit different. I will talk more about this. First of all, shortly about the background, Eesti Energia and Enefit. So Eesti Energia is the state-owned company. We are the energy company and utility company, the biggest in Estonia, but we also operate in Finland, in Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. We are one of the biggest green energy producers in the Baltics, but of course we have the quite a big share in the oil shale industry and oil shale power plants. But we have also been focusing now on the electrification of transportation under the brand called Enefit Volt. So under Enefit Volt, we first of all are a CPO, charge point operator, and we all are also a EMSP. But we are really looking at charging business as a whole. So like the previous presentations have also been mentioning that, of course, the public charging is very important, but the key is also solving the issues and the charging at home, at apartment buildings, also at work. So we are the EMSP of the whole bundle. I will first of all take you shortly back to 2013 actually. So at 2013, Estonia was actually the second country after Norway in the world of EV share. We were really as an example for the rest of the markets, and how did we achieve this? So we had the nationwide program for the electrification of transportation, and the main focuses were actually around the same topics that you have also brought up in the previous presentations. Of course, lack of infrastructure. At that time, there weren't any public chargers. Also high upfront costs of the electric vehicles. So the plan was actually to tackle those two main challenges along the way. So Estonia was actually the first nation in the world to have a nationwide charging network. So we had 165 charging stations, all in a one standardized model. We actually had the first ABB chargers in the world. Those chargers had 50 kilowatt DC charging with Shademo and 22 kilowatt AC charging with Type 2. And it was built up based on the simple rule that after every 60 kilometers, you had to add a charger. And as you can see, at that time, actually, there wasn't even the standard CCS that is the most common one at the moment. So all this infrastructure of these 165 chargers were built on the Shademo standard. Secondly, like I mentioned, we also had a strong support program for purchasing electric vehicle. So 50% of the sales price was covered by the government. And additionally, you were able to get 1,000 euros as a support for a personal charger. And actually, those activities were relatively successful. So with 4 years, we were able to grow from 0 to 1,000 electric vehicles. So the first 1,000 took 4 years, and the second 1,000 actually took 7 years. And that 2014, we were actually ahead of Latvia, Lithuania as well, even though we have quite less population. But with this program, in total, 650 electric vehicles were purchased, and also the Estonian government procured 507 electric vehicles. But as we can also see from the graph, the breakthrough didn't happen. The main reasons being that still at the time of 2011 to 2014, the selection of electric vehicles was quite low. In Estonia, there were basically 7 to 8 different electric vehicles you can choose from. And secondly, all this charging infrastructure was built on the CCS or the CHAdeMO standard. So you had quite a limited selection of electric vehicles to choose from, mainly that being Nissan Leafs. And now coming back to the current days, where is Estonia now? So if you look at the 2022 statistics, Estonia had EV share of 3.4%. We were behind from Latvia, Lithuania, and still behind from Norway's 2013 level, which was close to 5%. Although actually what we have been seeing this year is that the results from April came a little bit more positive. So we finally had a month that we had the EV share more than 5%. And based on the experience so far from the other countries, especially from the Nordics, is that after this 5%, the acceleration will speed up definitely. And at the moment, so the average age of our Estonian car fleet, we are actually third oldest in Europe. Only Romania and Lithuania are ahead of us. We are second in the carbon emissions per car, the first one being Cyprus. And until 6th of February this year, we also didn't have any kind of subsidies for electric vehicles or building up the infrastructure, etc. So we can see that we have moved away from those principles we started in 2010 quite a bit, and yeah, it for the rest of the market for the Nordics, it remains a question that can we actually be the pioneer that we once were. Talking more about now the charging infrastructure that we have in Estonia that we also took over in 2020. The initial charging network, it was built up from a variety of locations. So you had mainly municipality buildings, grocery stores, gas stations, car dealerships. So it was like a mix of different locations. Something that also has been brought up is that, and that what we are now doing is that we are really planning the charging infrastructure based on the need of the users. So really depending on the actual location and how much time the actual electric vehicle owner spends there. The initial charging network had only those fast chargers with CHAdeMO, also AC, dependless on the actual location. So you had same charges in the gas stations and the same charges in the hotels, although the user story behind it is totally different. And from the utilization, so the average of utilization of our charging network or the old charging network is 2%. In Norway, last year it was about 11 to 13%. So during the next 2 years, we are going to really renew the charging network here in Estonia. At the moment in Estonia, there is a total of 400 chargers, public chargers, which of half is owned by Enefit Wealth. So and we also have close to 4,000 electric vehicles in the market. So it rounds up to about 1 charger per 10 electric vehicles. But the main challenge is, like I mentioned, the lack of CCS fast and ultra fast chargers in Estonia. So we have been also seeing the market has been evolving, especially on the hardware side as well. Now we have more players in the market. The prices of fast and ultra fast chargers are coming down, so we can also expand the existing infrastructure, and we're going to build up 130 new chargers during a 2-year period, starting from this year, from June. And like I briefly mentioned, we have been more focusing on building up the charging infrastructure based on the needs. So also in the existing network, there are a lot of locations that are near apartment buildings. There is no need for or I couldn't say no need, but less need for fast charging near apartment buildings. But we are going to build up bigger charging hubs for semi-fast chargers using the existing charging infrastructure or the electricity grid as well. And the main focus is going to be covering the whole Estonia with 175 new CCS chargers, as well as building up ultra-fast charging stations outside of Tallinn and Tartu. Those are the main cities at the moment with the ultra-fast charging stations. And there is a big question of what will happen with the Shademo users in Estonia. The fleet is a little bit different comparing to the rest of the markets. We have 25% of fleet actually from Shademo users, mainly Nissan Leafs. But even after the upgrade, we will still have 69 Shademo fast chargers in our infrastructure, in our network, and also rest of the competitors have close to 50, so there will be more than 100 fast chargers for Shademo users. Just looking at the EV share at the moment and the new sale, then basically 99% of the new sales are coming from electric vehicles that are using CCS standard. Like I mentioned, we will add a better coverage of ultra-fast charging stations, and we will increase the existing CCS infrastructure by 5 times across Estonia. The first thing was that we want to reduce the range anxiety. The second thing is really bringing down the total cost of ownership of owning electric vehicle, especially with the current electricity prices. Although they are coming down, it's still high volatility. So only the scheduling of the charging sessions is not enough. So we have also built a smart charging application that will schedule the charging based on the Nord Pool spot the prices to the cheapest times, and this will also help, based on the experience so far, help customers save on the electricity bills 2 to 3 times, depending on the usage trends. And also something that was mentioned in the previous presentation, we also believe that electric vehicles have very big potential being and becoming the battery on wheels. Also, I have had a lot of questions about what will happen with the electricity grid. So of course it will become the bottleneck in some locations, especially in apartment building regions. We have also conducted different research on the substation level. So there is no problem actually in the private house regions, but in apartment building regions, based on our analysis in Estonian market, basically even when 10% of the existing people will go to electric vehicles, then it will already create the problems in the middle voltage substations that need to be replaced. But still, having electric vehicles integrated smartly to the grid, and this will allow us to use this existing power, especially when we will have the vehicle to grid live as well. So we have conducted vehicle to grid charging testing in Estonia. We have been also piloting with flexibility markets and services. Still, we don't have such kind of pool of flexibility services as the Nordic countries have, but from 2025, when we also have to make the desynchronization from Russia, then we will also have those flexibility markets, and we will be ready to offer flexibility services for electric vehicle owners to earn additional money, which will eventually reduce the total cost of ownership owning an electric vehicle. Yeah, so the question remains that can Estonia reach Norway's level? I believe we can. So if Norway was able to do it from the years 2013 to 2023, at the time when we had so low selection of electric vehicles, lack of infrastructure, lack of speed for charging infrastructure. So I truly believe that we can do it. So yeah, thank you for listening, and I will now take questions.
Thank you. Very good learnings from your country as well. I have a question. I learned that you at present moment have 50% of the charging infrastructure. And we also heard in the previous speakers about interoperability. So how do you see your company's role in the future when you have more large-scale society-wide charging networks where there's multiple actors? How do you simplify for the EV users long term, so to say?
Yeah, so at the moment, what is the situation is that we only have those charging points usable from our own application, but we are considering and in the talks with different players on the market currently in Estonia to also start roaming cooperations. And we also, like I showed, we are building this smart charging application, but the real key is to build up charging application and digital experience where electric vehicle owner has the overview and charging possibility from home, work, and on the road. So that's what we are building, but we are not only sticking those chargers to our own platform, we are also enabling other service providers to have the interoperability in the future. But this will come most likely during the second part of this year and the start of next year.
Thank you for that. Any other questions from the forum?
No.
Not
Okay,
at
and
this
thank you so
moment.
much, Kurt, also for being a hero, being the last one and 15 minutes ahead of schedule. So thank you so much. I think, then I think we thank all of you who participated. We would like to just, before we close the webinar, Patrick, we have a surprise.
Yeah, we have the theme of this was that it is a Nordic and Baltic experience exchange. So we were thinking if you had one moment to join us in a online survey. It's just one question, and it's about an experience exchange from everybody in the forum. So I'm going to share my screen, and what that will help us with, or what you need to do is that you need to log into a particular website called menti.com, and I will show you a number on screen here as well to be able to answer the question. So just bear with me, and then we will share my screen. Do I do that? Can you now see a screen?
Yes.
With a question? So if you go on to menti.com, either via your web browser on your computer or via your mobile phone, and then as you are at menti.com, you enter a code called 57184082. And then you will be able to answer this question. If you just have one answer, that's perfect. If you want to answer many good things, you can do as many as you like as well. It's possible to answer multiple times. So menti.com, and then the use code is 57184082. Meanwhile, you're pointing your browsers to that location if you want to contribute. So the question is, could you share successful approaches or actions taken in your country that encourage the use of electric vehicles and develop the necessary charging infrastructure? We've heard good examples in the webinar today, but the whole forum could also contribute with more experiences, we think. And so far we have 2 answers. Hanna, is there anything else we would like to say meanwhile answers are coming in, or?
No, and I think I'm very happy. I think this was a very fruitful and very interesting webinar. So we heard different experiences from the electrification of the transport system. And we will have future also webinars with the Nordic Plus. So also that will be hosted from other countries on different themes.
Perhaps, Hanna, we could share some of these answers as well as after we hang up in one way or another, or so.
Yes. Would you like to read some of the answers, Patrick, before we close the webinar?
Absolutely. I will read out 3 or 4. We have a Swedish bonus malus for purchase incentives as one good approach or action. And if I take an example from the Netherlands, apparently, Netherlands has implemented policies to promote EVs, including reserved parking spots with charging facilities and subsidies for private and public parking operators to install EV charging stations. We have another example from Denmark. In Denmark, municipalities are procuring EV infrastructure, sorry. Those are some of the answers that are coming in. We, at this moment, have 9 answers coming from 6 participants. This survey will be open even if after we hang up for a while, so you may answer moving forward as well. I will stop sharing my screen now, Anna.
Yes, thank you very much. And now we will stop recording the webinar. And I want to say thank you all for participating. And I'm really happy. And also a big thank you to all the speakers that joined us today. Okay.